what did Shimei do to David, and what was David's reaction? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Samuel on walking through the Bible.
Word the glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 2 Samuel chapter 16, verses 1 to 14. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 1. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Samuel chapter 16, beginning verse 1. Now when David was a little past the top of the mountain, there was Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, who met him with a couple of saddled donkeys, and on them 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 summer fruits, and a skin of wine. And the king said to Ziba, "What do you mean to do with these?" And Ziba said, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for those who are faint in the wilderness to drink." Then the king said, "And where is your master's son?" And Ziba said to the king, "Indeed, he is staying in Jerusalem, for he said, 'Today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom of my father to me.'" So the king said to Ziba, "Here, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours." And Ziba said, "I humbly bow before you, that I may find favor in your sight, my lord, O king." Now when King David came to Bahurim, there was a man from the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera, coming from there. He came out cursing continuously as he came. And he threw stones at David and at all the servants of King David. And all the people and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. Also Shimei said thus when he cursed, come out, you bloodthirsty man, you rogue. The Lord has brought upon you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned, and the Lord has delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom your son. So now you are caught in your own evil, because you are a bloodthirsty man." Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Please, let me go over and take off his head." But the king said, "What have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord has said to him, 'Curse David.' Who then shall say, 'Why have you done so?'" And David said to Abishai and all his servants, "See how my son, who came from my own body, seeks my life? How much more now may this Benjamite? Let him alone, and let him curse, for so the Lord has ordered him. It may be that the Lord will look on my affliction, and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing this day." And as David and his men went along the road, Shimei went along the hillside opposite him, and cursed as he went, threw stones at him, and kicked up dust. Now the king and all the people who were with him became weary, so they refreshed themselves there. David is fleeing Absalom after Absalom has staged a coup against him. He left Jerusalem and came to the Mount of Olives, where he worshipped God before continuing. As he came towards the top of the mountain, he had a choice to go north towards Gibeah, due east directly towards the Dead Sea into the Judean wilderness, or to go northeast towards what would have been Jericho. From verse 5 it appears that David took the latter option. It is likely that this posed the safest route, though all routes had their struggles with the terrain. Before heading this way, though, David runs into Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, that we met back in chapter 9. Ziba is coming to him with a couple of saddled donkeys and quite a lot of provision for David's journey away from Jerusalem. Now I'm sure when David saw Ziba that he was relieved, for yet another friend had come to aid him in his journey. When asked where Mephibosheth was, Ziba said that he was in Jerusalem, awaiting for the kingdom of Saul to be restored to him. Now on its face this sounds peculiar, for why would Absalom, a son of David who thought he would be a better ruler than his father, then turn around and restore the house of Saul to be the rightful king over Israel? But that is what Ziba was suggesting that Mephibosheth was expecting, something we need to remember for later. Now David rewards Ziba for this knowledge by giving Ziba all the land that was Mephibosheth's. Recall from chapter 9 that David had given all of Saul's land back to Mephibosheth and had made Ziba Mephibosheth's servant. Now Ziba was going to become the master because of Mephibosheth's supposed treachery. In doing this, David is judging things according to appearance by only hearing one side of the story and without doing further investigating. This is a dangerous way to judge, for one easily can make mistakes when judging this way. But as we've seen since David sinned with Bathsheba, David's judgments have not always been well thought out, and we'll find that out yet again in regards to this in future lessons. Verse 5 tells us that David then came to Bahurim. If you recall, Bahurim was where Michal had to leave her second husband behind as she was summoned back to David in Hebron. Bahurim was probably a city just east of the Mount of Olives, along the road to the Jordan River known as the Ascent of Adummim. This route from Jerusalem to Jericho was referenced many times in the New Testament, including in the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10, verses 25 to 37. That David came to Bahurim is why we conclude that David's exit route from Jerusalem was the Ascent of Adummim rather than the other routes he could have taken. At Bahurim is a man named Shimei, the son of Gera, a man from the family of the house of Saul. Now this doesn't mean that he was closely related to Saul, but that he was from Saul's family, at least distantly related. What Shimei did was curse David and throw rocks at him and his company, stating that David was getting what he deserved for being such a bloodthirsty man and for usurping the throne from the house of Saul. What this shows us is that even in David's kingdom, there were still loyalists to Saul, even if they were few in number. But even though they may be few in number, men like Shimei rejoiced at the circumstance that caused David to flee. For just as Shimei felt that David had usurped Saul's throne, so Absalom has done the same thing to David. Now Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, David's nephew and Joab's brother, wanted to punish Shimei for treating the king such a way by beheading him. This fits with the character of Joab and Abishai, for it seems they never met a problem they felt couldn't be solved by violence. David refused to let Abishai do so, for David felt that the Lord had sent Shimei to curse him as punishment for his sins, and therefore how was he going to fight against God by killing Shimei? Now this does not mean that the Lord caused Shimei to directly go and curse David. I don't believe that's what happened here, because Shimei was sinning, and we know that the Lord doesn't cause people to commit sin. Rather, we often forget that the Lord permits things to happen, even if he doesn't directly cause them. To the Hebrews, they understood this, but since the Lord permitted it, they often said that these actions were of the Lord. That doesn't mean they charged the Lord with evil or condoned the actions of the evil one. Simply that if God wanted to, he could have prevented the person from acting. So at the very least, the Lord allowed something to happen. And the same is true today. So often we look out and say, why would God allow something like this to happen? In short, God allows men to live in sin if that's what he wants. And he allows us to suffer the consequences. Now, yes, sometimes God does step in and bring about events to accomplish his purpose, like punishing sin or blessing people. But apart from Scripture, God doesn't reveal those actions to us. And so we need to be careful that we don't presume something is God acting directly when it simply could mean that God was allowing events to unfold. Make no mistake, though, God does act, but he acts in his own time and in his own way. God's will in punishing David for his sin was being done. But in the case of Shimei, God didn't cause Shimei to sin. He simply allowed Shimei to do what his heart led him to do, which was in this case evil. David's confidence in God, however, doesn't wane, saying that God could look on his affliction and repay him good for this cursing if it be his will. But David left those details to God, and he fled further away from Jerusalem, stopping along the way in order for him and his company to rest. We'll continue with this, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Samuel chapter 16, verses 15 to 23, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.